War has always been a game of innovation, sometimes genius, sometimes completely insane. From exploding rats to literal plague grenades, history is full of bizarre military inventions that sound like they belong in a science fiction novel. Today, we're counting down the top 10 weirdest weapons of war you've never heard of. Strap in, because number 1 will blow your mind. Number 10. Exploding rats. When you think of secret weapons, you probably don't think of dead rats. But in World War II, British intelligence developed a bizarre sabotage tactic: exploding rodents. Here's how it worked. British operatives would collect dead rats, slice them open, and stuff them with explosives. They'd then strategically place them near German boilers, train engines, and factory furnaces. The plan was simple but brilliant. Enemy workers, seeing a dead rat, would instinctively throw it into the nearest fire. But instead of just getting rid of a gross rodent, they'd unknowingly detonate an explosion, potentially sabotaging entire factories. So what happened? Well, the Nazis actually discovered the plan before it could be executed. However, the fear of booby-trapped rats paralyzed German maintenance crews, making them paranoid enough to inspect every little thing before disposal. So in a way, the plan still worked, just psychologically rather than explosively. Number 9. The fire lance. Gunpowder changed warfare forever, but before guns and cannons, the Chinese invented something truly terrifying: the fire lance. Imagine a spear that breathes fire. Originally developed in the 10th century, the fire lance was one of the first weapons to utilize gunpowder-based flamethrowers. It was basically a hollow bamboo or metal tube filled with black powder, shrapnel, and sometimes even poisoned darts. When ignited, it erupted in a burst of flames and projectiles, giving soldiers a fiery advantage in close combat. It was one of the earliest examples of gunpowder weapons, but it had a major downside: it burned out quickly and wasn't very accurate. Despite its limitations, the fire lance paved the way for more advanced firearms and artillery, making it an incredibly important stepping stone in military history. It was basically the great-great-grandfather of modern flame weapons. Number 8. The Gustav gun. The Germans took the phrase "bigger is better" way too seriously when they built the Gustav gun, the largest artillery piece ever created. This thing was an absolute behemoth. Weighing 1,350 tons and requiring 4,000 men to operate, it was designed to obliterate enemy fortifications from over 20 miles away. To put this in perspective, each shell it fired weighed as much as an elephant and could tear through 30 feet of concrete. But here's the problem: it was too big to be practical. The Gustav gun was so slow and difficult to move, it was an easy target for enemy bombers. It also took hours just to reload, making it one of the most inefficient weapons of World War II. Despite its size, it was only used a handful of times before the Germans abandoned the idea. Turns out, when your gun is bigger than a train, it's kind of hard to hide. Number 7. The war tuber. Before radar, the Japanese military relied on one of the strangest-looking inventions in military history: the war tuber. This wasn't actually a weapon, but rather a giant acoustic radar system designed to detect incoming enemy aircraft. Soldiers would use these massive metal cones to listen for the sound of approaching bombers, kind of like using a giant megaphone in reverse. The war tuber could pick up low-frequency sounds that human ears couldn't, theoretically giving Japan an early warning system. But once actual radar was developed, these gigantic listening horns became completely obsolete. Today, they mostly serve as an odd relic of pre-radar military tech, but you have to admit, they make some hilarious photos. Number 6. The Krumlauf. What if you could shoot around corners? Nazi Germany actually tried to make that a reality with the Krumlauf, a rifle attachment with a curved barrel. The concept was simple: bend the barrel of the gun so that soldiers could fire from behind cover without exposing themselves. It was meant for urban combat and tank crews, giving them an edge in close-quarters firefights. But here's the catch: bullets don't like turning corners. The high stress from the bend caused bullets to shatter inside the barrel, and the attachment wore out after just a few hundred rounds. While it technically worked, it was too unreliable to see widespread use. Still, the idea of a literal bendy gun makes it one of the weirdest military inventions ever attempted. Number 5. The wind cannon. Now here's a weapon that sounds like it came straight out of a sci-fi novel: Germany's wind cannon. The idea? Shoot shockwaves of compressed air strong enough to knock enemy planes out of the sky. Yes, you heard that right. A literal air gun for anti-aircraft defense. Developed late in World War II, the wind cannon used explosive bursts of pressurized air to generate invisible shockwaves. The hope was that this invisible force would cripple enemy aircraft. Unfortunately, the only thing it was good at knocking over was a wooden plank during testing. In combat, completely useless. Just another wild Nazi experiment that went absolutely nowhere. Number 4. The Vespa 150 TAP. Alright, so you need a military vehicle that's lightweight, easy to transport, and, oh yeah, it should also pack serious firepower. firepower. What's the solution? A tank? A jeep? No. How about a Vespa scooter with a freaking cannon on it? This is the Vespa 150 TAP, a French military experiment that turned a civilian scooter into an anti-tank weapon. This wasn't just a Vespa with a machine gun. It had a 75mm recoilless rifle mounted on the front. Designed for French paratroopers in the 1950s, the Vespa 150 TAP was meant to be airdropped onto the battlefield. Soldiers would unpack it, ride it straight into position, and blast enemy tanks with an artillery-sized gun, before hopping off and running for their lives. Now here's the catch. You couldn't actually fire the cannon while riding the Vespa. You had to stop, set it up on the ground, and use it like a stationary artillery piece. So in practice, it was more of a mobile gun transport than an actual combat vehicle. Despite its absurdity, it was actually used by the French military, but only in limited numbers. After all, when you're rolling into battle on a scooter, you're not exactly bulletproof. Number 3. The Tsar Tank. Alright, let's talk about a war machine that should have been terrifying, but ended up being an absolute joke. Meet the Tsar Tank, a Russian military monstrosity that was basically a tricycle on steroids. Designed during World War I, the Tsar Tank wasn't like normal tanks with treads. Instead, it had 2 enormous wheels, each over 30 feet tall. The idea was that these massive wheels would roll right over enemy trenches, barbed wire, and obstacles. In theory, it looked unstoppable. In reality, it was a complete disaster. The problem? The giant wheels worked great on flat ground, but got hopelessly stuck in mud. Worse, its rear wheels were tiny, making it hilariously unbalanced. The first time it saw rough terrain, the entire machine sank into the mud and never moved again. And if that wasn't bad enough, it was also an easy target. A tank this size couldn't hide, and enemy artillery would have torn it apart in seconds. The Russians abandoned the project, and the Tsar Tank never saw battle. Number 2. The Goliath tracked mine. What if your bomb could drive itself to the target? Meet the Goliath tracked mine, a miniature remote-controlled tank bomb developed by Nazi Germany in World War II. This tiny tank was designed to carry up to 220 pounds of explosives straight into enemy positions. Soldiers controlled it remotely via a joystick and a 2,000-foot-long cable, directing it toward bunkers, tanks, and troop formations. When it reached the target, boom, instant destruction. The Goliath was essentially an early prototype of modern military drones and remote-controlled bombs. But there was a catch. The Goliath had thin armor, meaning enemy soldiers could just shoot it, disable the controls. The cables could also be cut, rendering it completely useless. Despite its flaws, the Goliath was a seriously ahead of its time concept, paving the way for future drone warfare. Number 1. Fléchette dart bombs. Imagine thousands of tiny metal darts raining down from the sky, turning everything below into a pincushion of destruction. Sounds horrifying? That's exactly what fléchette bombs were designed to do. First used in World War I, fléchettes were small, aerodynamic steel darts that were dropped from planes over enemy soldiers. The goal? Pierce helmets, armor, and bodies with lethal precision. One bomb could release thousands of these needle-like projectiles, creating a deadly rain of metal over enemy trenches. But here's the truly eerie part. Fléchettes are still used in modern warfare. Artillery shells and missiles today sometimes contain fléchettes, making them an old-school weapon that never fully disappeared. Many countries have since banned them due to their brutal and indiscriminate nature. But for over a century, these tiny metal darts of doom have remained one of the weirdest and most terrifying weapons of war. And that's our list. Which of these weird weapons shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on more insane military history. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.